Have you ever wondered what it really means when someone who once cared deeply suddenly goes quiet, not angry, not emotional, not even asking questions anymore, just silent? Most people think silence is confusion. They think it means the person is waiting, thinking, or trying to figure things out. But what if that silence is not confusion at all? What if it is clarity? What if it is the final stage of something that already ended, long before you noticed? Stay with this, because by the end of this video, you will understand a truth most people realize too late. And once you see it, you will never look at silence the same way again. There is a kind of person who gives more than they take. The one who listens longer, tries harder, and feels deeper. The one who doesn't give up easily. The one who believes that with enough patience, enough understanding, and enough love, things can be fixed. That person is the empath. An empath does not walk away at the first sign of difficulty. They stay, they adjust, they forgive. They make excuses for behavior that others would never tolerate, not because they are weak, but because they see potential where others see problems. They believe in what could be, even when reality shows something else. And that is why their silence is so dangerous. Because when an empath goes quiet, it is not impulsive. It is not emotional. It is not a reaction in the moment. It is a conclusion. You see, before the silence ever appears on the outside, something shifts on the inside, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. At first, they try to communicate. They explain how they feel. They give chances. They wait for change. They hope the other person will understand. But when that understanding never comes, something begins to break. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Every time they feel ignored, something inside them pulls back. Every time their effort is not matched, their energy drops a little more. Every time they are made to feel like they are too much for simply caring, they start becoming less expressive, less emotional, less available. And here is the part most people miss. They don't announce this change. They don't warn you that they are reaching their limit, because they already tried that many times before. So instead of speaking again, they start observing. They watch actions instead of listening to words. They stop arguing. They stop chasing clarity. They stop trying to fix something that clearly doesn't want to be fixed. And this is where the silence begins. But understand this clearly. This silence is not empty. It is full of realization. It is the moment they finally accept what they were avoiding for so long. The moment they stop fighting reality. The moment they stop holding on to something that only they were carrying. This is not the silence of confusion. This is the silence of understanding. And once a person reaches this point, something irreversible happens. Their emotional investment starts to drop to zero. Not suddenly, not in one day, but steadily. The brain begins to protect itself. It stops chasing answers that never come. It stops expecting effort that never shows. It starts disconnecting from the source of repeated disappointment. And when that process completes, the attachment is gone. This is why the silence feels different, because it is not filled with tension anymore. It is not filled with questions. It is not filled with hope. It is calm. And calm in this situation is not peace between two people. It is peace within one person who has decided to let go. Think about that. The same person who once over-explained everything now says nothing. The same person who once fought to stay now doesn't even react. The same person who once cared deeply now feels distant. That shift does not happen without a reason. It happens because something inside them has already ended. And here is the truth most people are not ready to hear. By the time you notice their silence, you are already too late, because their decision was not made in the moment you saw them go quiet. Their decision was made in all the moments you ignored before that, all the times they tried and felt unseen, all the times they stayed when they should have walked away. Silence is not where the story ends. Silence is where the truth finally shows itself. And when an empath reaches that level of silence, they are not waiting anymore. They are done, not in anger, not in pain, but in acceptance. And acceptance is the most powerful form of ending. Because once someone accepts that something is not for them, they stop trying to change it. They stop hoping for a different outcome. They stop investing energy into something that no longer gives them anything in return. They simply release it quietly, without drama, without explanation, without looking back. So if you ever find yourself facing that kind of silence, understand what it really means. It means the conversation is over, even if no words were spoken. It means the connection has already been closed, even if no goodbye was said. And it means the person you thought would always stay has already left, long before you realized it. Because the moment they stopped explaining, something irreversible had already happened inside them. What happens next is something most people never expect. Because it does not follow logic, it follows patterns. Now think about the person on the other side, the one who kept distance, the one who avoided depth, the one who never fully stepped in, yet never completely walked away. This is where avoidant behavior becomes important to understand. An avoidant does not experience connection the same way. Closeness can feel uncomfortable. Emotional intensity can feel overwhelming. So instead of moving closer when things get real, they move back. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes it shows as delayed replies. Sometimes as mixed signals. Sometimes as sudden coldness after moments of warmth. It creates confusion, but to them, it feels like control. They believe space keeps them safe. They believe distance protects them from losing themselves. And because of this, they develop a silent assumption over time that no matter how inconsistent they are, the other person will still be there. This assumption becomes their comfort zone. They don't say it out loud. They don't even fully realize it. But their actions are built on it. They pull away, expecting to be chased. They become unclear, expecting to be understood. They give less, expecting the other person to give more. And for a long time, this pattern works because the empath keeps showing up, keeps adjusting, keeps trying to make sense of things, keeps filling the emotional gaps that were never meant to be filled by one person alone. But here is where everything starts to shift. When that effort suddenly disappears, the avoidant feels it, not immediately, but gradually. At first, they might not even notice. The silence feels normal to them. After all, distance is what they are used to. They might assume everything is fine. They might think the other person is just busy or taking space. But something is different this time. There is no emotional pull coming from the other side, no attempts to reconnect, no energy trying to close the gap. And this is where confusion begins, because for the first time their pattern is not working. There is no one chasing, no one over-explaining, no one trying to hold everything together. The dynamic they relied on is gone. And when that realization slowly starts to sink in, it creates a feeling they are not used to facing. Uncertainty. Now they start thinking, why is there no reaction? Why does it feel like something is missing? Why is the connection not responding the way it always did before? But here is the psychological truth. Avoidants often do not process emotions in real time. While everything is happening, they stay distant. They detach early to avoid discomfort. They keep things at a level where they don't have to feel too much. But once the situation becomes real, once the absence becomes undeniable, their mind starts catching up. And that is when the impact begins. Human nature is strange in this way. People do not always value what is present. They value what feels like it could disappear. And now, something has. The consistency they once ignored is no longer there. The attention they once took for granted has stopped. The emotional safety they never acknowledged has been removed. This creates a shift inside them. They start replaying moments. They start noticing details they once overlooked. Small things begin to feel significant. Silence starts to feel heavier. But here is the hard truth. This realization is delayed. It does not happen when the other person was trying. It does not happen when things could have been fixed. It happens after the effort is gone, after the connection has already weakened, after the person who cared has already stepped back internally. And this delay is what changes everything, because now the avoidant may feel something they were avoiding all along. Loss. Not always in a dramatic way, not always in a way they can even explain, but in a quiet, unsettling way that keeps growing over time. They might start checking for signs. They might become more aware of the absence. They might even feel the urge to reach out, but something stops them. Pride, fear, uncertainty about how they will be received, because for the first time they are not in control of the situation anymore. The roles have shifted. And when roles shift, it creates discomfort. The person who once held on has let go. The person who once gave clarity has become distant. The person who once stayed is no longer available in the same way, and now the avoidant is left facing something they are not prepared for, a connection that no longer responds. This is the moment where many begin to realize something important. They did not lose the person when things went quiet. They lost them long before that. They just didn't notice. Because while they were creating space, the other person was creating distance. While they were avoiding depth, the other person was losing connection. While they believed everything would stay the same, everything was slowly changing. And by the time they finally feel it, the shift has already happened. This is why silence hits differently for someone who is used to control, because it takes away the one thing they depended on, predictability. They no longer know what the other person feels. They no longer know if the connection can be restored. They no longer know if they still have access to what once felt guaranteed. And that unknown becomes louder than anything that was ever said before, because now they are not reacting to presence. They are reacting to absence. And absence forces clarity in a way that presence never could. And while that realization slowly grows on one side, something even more powerful is happening on the other, because the person who once carried the emotional weight is no longer standing in the same place. They didn't just step back physically, they moved internally. This is the part most people never see. From the outside, it looks like distance. It looks like calm behavior. It looks like someone simply choosing to stay quiet. But inside, a complete transformation has already taken place. This change did not happen in one moment. It was built over time. Every unmet expectation added a small crack. Every moment of feeling unimportant created a little more space. Every time their effort was not returned, something inside them slowly began to close. At first, they questioned themselves. Maybe they were asking for too much. Maybe they were expecting too much. Maybe they just needed to be more patient. So they tried again. They gave more understanding. They adjusted their behavior. They lowered their expectations. They convinced themselves that things would improve if they just held on a little longer. But instead of improvement, they felt heavier. Not because of one big moment, but because of many small ones that kept repeating. This is how emotional exhaustion begins. Not with loud arguments, not with dramatic endings, but with quiet disappointment that keeps returning. And eventually, the mind reaches a point where it can no longer carry that weight. Something has to change, and when it does not look like anger. It looks like detachment. They stop analyzing every situation. They stop trying to decode mixed behavior. They stop searching for meaning in things that no longer make sense. Clarity replaces confusion. They begin to see patterns instead of excuses. They begin to recognize that effort cannot be one-sided forever. They begin to understand that staying in a place where they feel unseen is slowly damaging them. And once that awareness becomes clear, everything shifts. The emotional energy they once invested starts to pull back. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. They no longer feel the need to respond immediately. They no longer feel the urge to explain themselves. They no longer feel responsible for maintaining a connection that requires two people. For the first time, they choose themselves. This is not selfishness. This is self-preservation. The brain is designed to protect. When it realizes that a situation is causing more harm than good, it begins to create distance. It reduces attachment. It lowers emotional involvement. This is how detachment works. It is not about forgetting the person. It is about releasing the hold they once had. And when this process reaches its final stage, something unexpected happens. The feelings fade, not completely at once, but enough to change everything. The same conversations that once meant everything now feel empty. The same presence that once brought comfort now feels neutral. The same connection that once felt strong now feels distant. And in that moment, they realize something important. They are no longer emotionally connected in the same way. This realization does not bring excitement. It brings peace. Because for so long, They were trying to hold something together. For so long, they were carrying emotions that were not being returned. For so long, they were fighting to keep something alive. And now, they are free from that struggle. There is no more overthinking, no more waiting for change, no more hoping for a different outcome. Just acceptance. And acceptance is quiet. It does not need to prove anything. It does not need validation. It does not need closure from the other person. It simply understands and lets go. This is why their silence feels so different now, because it is no longer filled with expectation. It is complete. They are no longer holding on internally, so there is nothing left to express externally. And this is the part that is hardest to reverse, because once someone reaches this level of emotional clarity, going back feels unnatural, not impossible, but unlikely. The connection that once felt meaningful has already been processed, understood, and released within their mind. They are not waiting for change anymore. They have already accepted that it is not coming. And when a person reaches that point, their behavior becomes consistent with their decision. They stop checking. They stop reacting. They stop caring in the way they once did, not out of bitterness, but out of closure. This is what true detachment looks like. It is calm, it is steady, it is final, and the most important part, it happens long before anyone else realizes it. By the time it becomes visible on the outside, it has already been completed on the inside. This is why it feels so sudden to others, because they only see the end. They never saw the process. They never felt the slow shift. They never noticed the moments where things were quietly falling apart. They never understood how much was being carried until it was no longer there. And now, there is nothing left to hold on to, because the person who once stayed connected has already disconnected within themselves. And once that internal disconnection is complete, everything else simply follows. And when that inner shift is complete, the story does not end there. It actually begins a new phase, one that most people are not prepared to face. Because now, the person who once kept their distance starts to feel something unfamiliar. Not control, not comfort, but a quiet sense of something missing. At first, it is subtle, a thought that appears for a moment and disappears, a feeling that something is different but hard to explain, a small awareness that the connection no longer feels the same. They may try to ignore it. They may distract themselves. They may tell themselves it does not matter. They may believe everything will return to normal with time, but this time, it does not. Because what changed was not temporary. It was permanent. And slowly, that realization becomes harder to avoid. They start noticing the absence in situations where it once felt natural. Moments that used to bring a certain energy now feel quieter. Conversations that once had meaning now feel incomplete. It is not about constant thinking. It is about the absence being felt in unexpected moments. And this is where awareness begins to grow. They start to understand that something important is no longer within reach. Something that once existed without effort is no longer available in the same way. And that creates a new kind of tension. Not the kind that comes from arguments, but the kind that comes from missed chances. They begin to look back. They remember times when they could have responded differently, times when they could have shown more presence, times when they had the opportunity to build something stronger, but chose distance instead. And now those moments feel different, not because they changed, but because perspective changed. What once seemed small now feels significant. What once felt optional now feels valuable. What once was taken lightly now carries weight. This is how realization works. It does not arrive when everything is available. It arrives when something is no longer there. And by the time it fully settles in, it brings a difficult truth. The connection they assumed would always exist is no longer the same. This is when many try to return. Not always in obvious ways, sometimes through a message, sometimes through a casual check-in, sometimes through small actions that test if the door is still open. But what they find is not what they expect, because the person they are reaching out to is no longer standing in the same place emotionally. There is no urgency in the response, no emotional pull, no sense of trying to rebuild what was lost, just calm, controlled distance. And that creates a moment of clarity, because now they are not facing the same dynamic anymore. They are facing someone who has already moved on internally, and that changes everything. The effort that once felt one-sided is no longer being given. The attention that once came naturally is no longer offered. The emotional availability that once made the connection feel alive is no longer present. And this is when the reality becomes clear, not through words, but through behavior. They begin to understand that they are no longer dealing with the same person, not because that person changed suddenly, but because that person finally stopped waiting. This realization can be uncomfortable, because it removes the illusion of control. It shows that actions have consequences, even if those consequences are delayed. It shows that consistency matters, even when it is not demanded. It shows that connection requires effort from both sides, not just one. And most importantly, it shows that once someone reaches a point of true emotional closure, reopening that connection is not simple, because the bond that once existed was built on feelings that are no longer active. And without those feelings, the connection cannot return to what it was. This is why timing matters, because understanding something late does not always create a second chance. Sometimes it only creates awareness. Awareness of what was lost, awareness of what could have been, awareness of what is no longer possible in the same way. And that awareness stays, not as regret in a dramatic sense, but as a quiet knowing, a knowing that something valuable was present. And it was not fully recognized at the time. And now, the roles are completely reversed. The one who once tried to hold on has already let go. The one who once needed clarity has already found it within. The one who once stayed despite everything has already chosen a different path internally. And the one who once felt in control is now left understanding the situation without the power to change it easily. This is the final shift. Not loud, not emotional, but deeply real. Because now, both sides see the truth, just at different times. One saw it early and acted on it. The other sees it late and has to live with it. And that difference in timing is what makes all the difference in the outcome. Because when something ends quietly, it often ends completely. No arguments, no final explanations, no clear moment where everything is said. Just a slow realization that what once existed is no longer there. And by the time that realization reaches both sides, the story has already finished.